here in Estonia. We're on Iron Duke, HMS Iron Duke here, that's based or just here in Tallinn for a while. We've got troops just the boundary who are going to be here over Christmas. But we must be alert to all of the challenges coming from Russia, including what we call hybrid challenges, which are the other ways in which they're conducting the conflict in Ukraine.
When we step back on the big picture, we are in a new Cold War scenario with Russia now.
Look, we're at a very critical point, that's for sure. We've just passed the 1,000-day mark of this conflict. There is one aggressor here, and that is Russia. And that is why we must be resolute. And my message today and consistently over recent months has been that whatever the discussion about whether there may or may not be negotiations, we mustn't do anything that reduces our support for Ukraine. On the contrary, we must double down and increase our support for Ukraine and to put Ukraine in the best possible position, whether there's negotiations or not.
What's your message to Donald Trump on Ukraine? Because he seems to be keen on a negotiation. It's going to play out next year.
Well, we're continuing to discuss the best way forward, but the UK and the US have a special relationship, forged in difficult circumstances and for good reason. But equally, the US is a key NATO ally, of course, and we've been working with the US throughout. So yes, we're having a discussion with President-elect Trump, and that's exactly what you would expect.
Yeah, and stick by Zelensky is the core message to Trump, is it?
Yes, and I think that's understood. Our discussions have been constructive in terms of the need to stand by Ukraine.
Defence spending. Do you think there is an argument that NATO needs to consider 3% as the target rather than 2%?
Well, what we've done is commit to setting out a pathway to 2.5%, as you know, and we'll do that in due course.
Definitely before the election, you'll hit 2.5, do you think?
Well, we'll set out our pathway to that in due course. But there was a discussion, and there's an ongoing discussion about defence spending. But the discussion that we had this morning was not just about the percentage of any given NATO ally, but also about how we use that spending. How do we coordinate what we're doing? How do we collaborate on what we're doing? I was in Norway, we had a good discussion about the joint work that we are doing and how we can use that spending to best effect. Putin has made strategic mistakes in this conflict because he thought that he would weaken NATO. NATO is now stronger than it was, bigger than it was with new members, and to my mind as important today as it was when it was set up in the post-war era.
Undersea cables, I know you've got concern about Russia specifically and what they're doing.
We've got a lot of infrastructure under the sea, as you know, oil and gas and fibre cables that are absolutely vital. I'm mindful of the fact that there are challenges and risks, particularly with the various conflicts that are going on at the moment. That's among the reasons why when I was in Norway yesterday, I took the time for an in-depth, secure briefing on our response to those challenges and risks.
What is your message to Vladimir Putin? Is it don't go near the cables?
Absolutely. I mean, we know that conflict takes a number of different forms.
And what is the fear? Is it a stock market crash if anybody did fiddle with those cables in some way?
Well, I'm not going to go into the details. It's obvious that there's a risk and vulnerability there. That's why we carry out the assessments. That's why I wanted to assure myself that along with our allies, we're taking the necessary precautions to prevent any harm to the United Kingdom.
You've taken steps during this trip to crack down on Russian gas still getting into Europe. Some European capitals are still using Russian gas. What's your message to them? Is it wean off this stuff?
Yeah, I think the general view on Europe is that we must absolutely ensure that there's much less reliance on anything coming from Russia. We've put in very important sanctions. We've announced a tightening of the screw on those sanctions only today, and in the meeting I had with key NATO allies this morning, we were talking about how we must put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. That means improving the capability that they have desperately needed.
And you want allies to go further, do you, on scaling back on Russian oil and gas? Because Germany is still quite reliant on it.
Well, look, I'm not going to stand here and start telling NATO allies what to do, but I think everybody understands that the conflict with Russia is one where we must stand with Ukraine and do everything we need to do to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. Does that include capabilities? Yes, it does. Does it include sanctions and tightening those sanctions as we've done today? Yes, it does. Does it include the training that we've been putting in place? And of course the funding that is going to be needed.
Some domestic matters. You'll be aware that your personal poll rating, lowest approval rating of any Prime Minister after 5 months, is a new poll this week. Does it bother you being unpopular?
What bothers me is delivering for the British people, and so I get up every day absolutely clear in what I have to do, which is to make people feel better off by taking the key decisions that matter to them, to make sure the health service is there for them when they need it, drive down those waiting lists.
So it sounds like you're not that bothered by these polls then.
I was elected in, there was a big poll on July the 4th, we got a good majority. That majority was there with a mandate for change. We're carrying out the change. I've set out what the change I'm going to bring about for the British people, which is about feeling better off, which is about making sure those waiting lists are driven down, make sure people have the policing they need to feel safe and secure. And I'm very happy and will no doubt be judged on that in the next election.
Taxes, we are the Telegraph, so you wouldn't expect us not to ask about tax cuts. I know you won't make promises all the way up to the election, but just a simple one. Can you give any reassurances that you don't want more tax rises next year?
Well, let me give this reassurance, because we had to stabilise the economy and deal with a £22 billion black hole this time around, and that required us to make tough and difficult decisions in relation to both tax and spend. But I think that when you know there are difficult decisions to make, you should make them early, and we did. And that's why when the Chancellor says we're not going to go through that sort of budget again, she's right about that, and that's why I can say and give reassurance in relation to tax that I know that individuals, families and businesses want the certainty of knowing that the tax regime is not going to change very much. When you're pushing me to say, there's no circumstance in which anything would change, well, that's obviously a different question. But I do want to give reassurance here, because we did do the difficult stuff in this budget. That's why I do want to give the reassurance that we have taken the tough decisions in the budget, but we need that period of certainty now for businesses, and that's what we want to deliver.